I've been a retirement advisor now for over 20 years. And in today's video, I want to share with you my 5 top tips for retiring comfortably. Let's go for a walk and let's talk about it. So the first one's really a surprise to people, and this is not one of the 5, but it's just a reality that I want to share with you as we begin this discussion. And that is, the secret is, most people are likely not going to be comfortable before they retire. And why is that? Well, it's a huge transition. You know, for most of us, we've been working in our job, our career for 20, 30, 40 years. We've gotten comfortable with it. It's what we've done. We can't remember what it was like to not have a job. And to make a transition like that from working to not working is probably one of the 3 biggest transitions of our life, right? If you went to college or when you left your parents' home after 16, 17, 18, 20 years at home, that was a huge transition. If you got married, that was a big transition as well. When you had kids, obviously, if you have kids, that was a big transition. And this is, next to those 3 or 4, this is probably the next biggest transition. And there's only so much you can do to prepare. So if you don't feel comfortable, I want you to know that that's normal. And we'll do what we can to get comfortable. But at some point, there is a leap of faith that you have to do. If you wait to be comfortable, you may waste 2, 3, 5 years of your youngest and most active years in retirement because you feel like, you know, just emotionally you're not ready. So I want to just lay that groundwork. But the first secret to get comfortable being ready to retire soon, believe it or not, is getting comfortable with what your expenses are. It doesn't start with your savings, it starts with your expenses. When I meet somebody for the first time and we're starting to talk about, you know, what does it take to retire? Are they close? The first thing I ask them is, you know, what are your plans in retirement? What are you planning on doing? And let's figure out what that's going to cost. Some people have a pretty good feel for what it's going to cost, and many people do not. So putting pen to paper and coming up with those expenses can be the first step. And none of what I'm sharing today is financial advice. These are just things I want to put on your radar screen. But I do want to encourage you to talk to somebody that has helped other people prepare to retire. You know, I'm biased, admittedly, but a fiduciary financial advisor or an accountant, somebody that can look at your expenses and say, yeah, this is a pretty good list, or you know what, you might have left something off. And let me give you an example of things that people oftentimes leave off. And one of the biggest ones is taxes. And figuring out what your tax expense is going to be can be a little bit more involved because it depends on which accounts you take money out of to get your cash flow. So is it a Roth account? Is it a regular IRA or regular 401k? Is it a regular taxable account? And the differences there can be big. So first tip to get comfortable is get clarity on what your expenses are. And one of those expenses is going to be taxes. And then also have a knowledgeable person look at that list to make sure that you're not missing anything. And the second point is kind of related to the first one, which is, you know, I'm going to ask you, are you sure? You know, are you sure that, let's say you want to travel around the world. Are you sure you want to do that? Have you done some of that? Have you test driven the things that you say you want to do? And have you test driven the budget that you say you can live under, right? If you've been spending, let's say, $8,000 a month and you say in retirement, we're going to cut that back to $6,000 a month, I really encourage you to test drive that $6,000 a month as an example before you pull the trigger, preferably, you know, a couple years before you pull the trigger, just so that you have a feel for how sacrificial might that feel in my example here to go from $8,000 a month to $6,000 a month, which on a percentage basis is pretty common. You know, the rule, I'm not a big fan of rules of thumb, but a rule of thumb is that people spend 80% of what their pre-retirement income was. It's not bad to get you in the ballpark, but I want you to test drive it because for some people, they're going to say, you know what, that was super easy. This is a very comfortable lifestyle. Let's say, you know, you like hiking in the outdoors. You like skiing in the winter at a local resort where you have a season pass and you don't have to pay for lodging. You like mountain biking in the summer, things like that. Those tend to not, you can make them expensive, but they tend to not be more expensive things. But if what you're planning on doing is staying in 4- and 5-star hotels and traveling the world, that can get expensive really quickly. So, you know, make sure that the activities that you think you want to do, that you've test driven them. There is no certainty. Again, getting to the you know, people don't get comfortable. A lot of people never get comfortable. And it's the same thing with activities in retirement. You won't know. A classic example is golf. People love golf, but you know, do you want to do that 5 or 7 days a week? There are people that love doing that. And if that's you, great. But other people, if that's what you're hanging your hat on, and you say, okay, this is going to be my activity in retirement, just test drive it to the extent that you can ahead of time. And, you know, people pivot, people change all the time, but try to get as much clarity on that as you can. Okay, number 3 is I want you to set a goal. You know, what is your goal? Once you have your expenses, then either work with a professional, preferably, again, I'm biased, a fiduciary fee-only financial advisor, and figure out, you know, what is it going to take in order to be able to spend that kind of money. Now, hopefully, you've looked at your expenses and realized it's not static. Just because you're spending, let's say, $6,000 a month, to use my previous example, you may find early in retirement that's what you spend. But a couple years later, once you've gotten the big trips out of the way and things like that, you may very well be spending less than that, which is great. You have your go-go years, your slow-go years, and then your no-go years. So come up with a budget. Think through how much money you need in order to retire. Also think about, when do you want to retire? You know, the average in the United States is about 65. I can tell you that about 40% of people don't get to choose when they retire. They maybe get 60, they get 62, and maybe they lose their health or they get laid off from their job, and at that age it's hard to get another job. So think about what the financial number is that you're going towards, and also think about the age. And I want you to be really careful about the age, because at 60 years old, you know, you're probably feeling pretty healthy. Hopefully you are. But unfortunately, many of us are going to lose our health along the way. Somewhere, you know, between 70 and 80 is what many of us lose. So if you're 60 years old, you likely have less than 1,000 weeks of healthy active time remaining. And that's not a lot of time. So think about not just a financial number, but an age. And I like to tell people to think through, you know, either the first to happen or the last to happen. And for some people, they'll say, okay, this is the number, and at a minimum, I want to make sure that I've retired by 65. And if that's you, let's say you're 80% of goal, but you've hit the age 65, well then, you know, maybe you look and say, okay, this is good enough. This is what I have. So set a goal, and then think about what the final trigger is going to be, so that you just don't fall victim of one of the most costly mistakes that retirees make. It's a 4-word phrase, which is just one more year. And you can one more year yourself through the best years of your retirement. Okay, point number 4 for a comfortable retirement is to make sure that you have confidence in your plan, and that you're comfortable with your plan. You don't want to feel like you're overly sacrificing, but you also don't want to jeopardize your plan. So you want to have confidence, and you also want to be comfortable. You want to know that you're likely, there's no guarantees, but you want to know there's a really good chance you're not going to run out of money. And you want to make sure that it's a comfortable life for you. Many people, when they test drive their expenses, say, you know what, I'd rather work an extra year or two than retire sooner and have to sacrifice more. And that's a decision that each person has to make on their own. Again, there is no right answer. The right answer is what's right for you. And the fifth one is thinking through what's going to make it easier in order to retire. What are the main drivers? And again, this is where somebody that's been in the profession for many years can be helpful. I can tell you from my experience, the things that make it easier to enjoy your retirement are not necessarily the financial side, right? You do want to have comfort, you do want to have enough money that you can live comfortably, but the main things that drive people's satisfaction and happiness in retirement are really three things. The first one is relationships, having friends, and just be prepared, because when you first retire, many of us have friends through our work, and you'd like to think, you know what, I'm going to be able to keep these friends. But the reality is we're in a very different situation once we retire. And many of our friends, you know, you had a common purpose, you had proximity with those friends. So even though they're good people and they want to keep in touch with you, your life is just different now. And so relationships are important, and just be prepared that your work friends likely will start to dwindle off of your radar screen. So relationships are important. Having a purpose in retirement is important. You know, what are you going to do that gives you purpose and meaning and gets you excited to wake up every day? And then the last one is your health. Your health is super important. Maintaining your health, both physically, but also emotionally. At first, retirement, there's 4 phases to retirement. The first one is it feels like vacation, and that's great. Make that last as long as you can. The second phase is you're going to feel a sense of loss. I mentioned earlier about losing some friends at work. You lose your routine. You may lose your sense of purpose. You'll lose your old sense of purpose and hopefully develop another one. The third phase is kind of the iterating process, finding out who you are now that you're retired. And some people are lucky, the first thing they try works. Other people, they have to try multiple things until they find someone that's like, okay, this is who I am. And the fourth phase is contentment with the transition. And the good news is, I can tell you that the vast majority of folks, I mean 80–90% of people, once they get through the transition, they look at it and say, you know what, I'm really glad that I retired, but it's not necessarily just a smooth transition. It's something we've all looked forward to, but if, like many things in life, if we plan ahead, we can be more successful, we can be happier with that outcome. And related to this, I did a video called 5 Reasons to Retire as Soon as You Can that lays out, goes into more depth of what I was talking earlier about why you should think about retiring sooner versus putting off that decision. I'll see you in that video. Thanks for watching this one. Bye-bye.